Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year. Don't know what video is going up first, but I said Happy New Year in my last one too. So today we are going to be doing something really fun that is new to my channel. I've talked about this before, but I've never really gone into detail on how much I love stats and statistics. So we're gonna talk about all of the books that I read this year in statistic format. So we're gonna have a couple of different videos going up. This one is just stats focused, so if that's something you're interested in, please stay tuned and watch. I'm gonna have a separate one that is all of my favorite books from the year, maybe a top 10. That's not this one. That will be next on my list of videos to make. So I had a really great reading year, and do just keep in mind, I always say this in all of my videos, but no matter how much you read, you should be proud of yourself. Doesn't matter if you read 2 books or 100 and something like I've read. So part of the reason I'm able to read so much is because I do listen to audiobooks. I have a Kindle and I do physical books, so I do a little bit of everything. We'll go into how much of each one of those things I did this year in a little bit. But I recently did get a Kindle and started reading on that. Haven't quite gotten used to it yet. It's a little bit of a learning curve for me. But alas, I still really like it. It's a lot easier to read when it's dark or when you're laying down. So let's go ahead and get into some fun stats. Okay, so I'm going to be putting graphs up on the screen, and I'm also going to be looking at my laptop. So just keep that in mind if you see me looking down a lot. As far as the total number of books that I read this year, drum roll. Also, there's many ways to track your reading. A lot of people use Goodreads or Storygraph. Right now, I only have Goodreads. Let me know if I should join Storygraph. I'll have my Goodreads link down below if you want to follow me there. I also am a nerd and have a spreadsheet in numbers on my MacBook. So that's what I use because I like to track very specific things that a lot of reading apps don't let you track. So that's kind of what I use. And to make a lot of these charts, I'm using Canva, which I really like. So that's kind of a little preface for the video. So I've read 123 books in 2023, and that is more than I've read in a long time. My resurgence for reading kind of resurfaced in 2020. I know that's how it was for a lot of people while we were stuck at home. I've always loved to read, and I've always been a pretty fast reader. But once I introduced audiobooks, that's what really changed the game for me, because a lot of the books that I read this year were audiobooks, just being fully transparent. I'm very passionate about the fact that audiobooks count just as much as reading a physical book. You're still getting the content, you are still consuming the book. How you choose to do that is up to you. Your reading is valid. End of story. I also am a crazy person, and I do have ADHD, and I don't know if this has to do with that necessarily, but I have to listen to audiobooks on a very quick speed, otherwise I lose interest. I also listen to audiobooks while I'm multitasking, do other things, while I drive, while I clean. That's mostly what I'm doing in my free time, to be honest. I do listen to music, I do watch TV, I do watch movies. But if I'm alone doing tasks like that, I have an audiobook in my ear at the same time. I have to have multiple things going at once, and I listen to them on 2 times speed, sometimes 2.5 speed. So if you're wondering why I am able to read so much, that's part of the reason why. But let's go ahead and get into the fun stuff, shall we? So 123 books this year. As far as by month breakdown, I'm going to try to put a chart up here and just kind of talk through it. But I read the most in December. That's actually really surprising to me because a lot of stuff happens in December, obviously the holidays. I read 15 books in the month of December. But when I think about it, I do a lot of traveling in December, so I was able to read a lot during that time. The second most months are November and May, with 12 books. So I also read a lot of shorter books in December, and I do also count manga as well, which only 10 of the books that I read were manga, so it's not it takes up a bunch of room anyway. But that's kind of my month by month breakdown. The month I read the least amount of books was July, where I only read 7 books. That's still a lot, I recognize, but just for perspective as far as month breakdown. So that's some interesting things. As far as the genres, I put a wheel up on the screen to show you by far the most read genre that I have is fantasy. That is my favorite genre. One of my goals for next year, which I'll make a whole other video talking about like my goals. One of the goals that I have is to read more of different genres, to kind of like expand my horizons. I did read a decent amount of other books too in different genres, but I really want to hone in on nonfiction and classics. I have a lot of those on my shelf that I haven't gotten to that I want to get to. So we'll make a whole video about that. Don't worry, we'll get to that later. But fantasy, I read 50 fantasy books this year. A lot of those are series. I don't have the exact breakdown. I might add it on the screen of like series versus standalone. Most of this fantasy I'm reading is a series or will be a series. It might be like the first in a series. The next top genre is thriller, which checks out. That's also up there. Also, as far as like the genre that I label a book as, especially if it's like potentially multiple genres, I typically use Goodreads, like whatever the top genre underneath the book is what I give it. Next we have horror with 11. We have manga with 10, mystery with 8. Mystery and thriller are usually pretty like similar, but to me they are definitely different. Like usually the primary focus of the story is different. And then we have romance with 7, nonfiction with 6, contemporary with 4, sci-fi with 4, and historical fiction with 4. I definitely want to read more contemporary or literary fiction this next year, because typically all of those I really enjoy. I think all of the ones I read were ranked really highly this year, so definitely want to prioritize that. As far as the format of the books, this is kind of going to show what I was talking about earlier. 73 of the books I listened to as audiobooks. 37, which is still a lot, were physical. 11 were ebook, and 2 of those were tandem reads. So I read them in 2 different forms. So like either physical and audiobook or physical and ebook, like at separate times. So not necessarily at the same time, which I have done before, and it is kind of fun. But in this instance, I'm talking about like multiple different ways of the same book. That's one thing that I do if I am reading like a longer book. If I want to kind of speed up the process, when I'm at home and I have free time, I will read physically, and then like when I'm traveling or something, I'll have the audiobook. As far as the books that I read physically, this is something I'm wanting to work on as well. 15 of those were from my backlog, like my TBR. That's not a lot. I need to do better with that. So at 37 physical books, only 15 of those, so roughly half-ish, a little less than half, were ones that I already owned. And 23 of those 37 were ones that I purchased this year or last year. So, and 8 of them were books that I reread. So that is not a great percentage, and I want to work more on the books that I already have. And I also want to prioritize books that were gifted to me. So as far as publication, I think this is something that's very interesting. I don't know, I just find it cool. I read a lot of new releases this year. I might do a whole separate video on that of like all the books that came out in 2023 that I read, if that'd be interesting to you. But I like reviewing books kind of as they come out, staying on top of things. But I also want to visit some that are like older. Again, I want to kind of read some more classics next year. So the most read decade for me was the 2020 decade, shocker. I did have a specific section for 2023, which was my third most. So 2020, the decade of 2020, I read 43 books from that decade, this decade. 30 of the books that I read were from the 2010 decade, and then 21 were specifically from 2023. I read 14 books from the 2000 decade. I read 8 books from 1990. I read 1 book from 1980, 1 from 1960, and 1 from 1950. So that was like my one classic that I read this month, which I think I forgot to put on my genre stats, but whatever, it's fine. As far as the ratings for these books, this is, as far as like how I rate my books, I've mentioned in videos before, I'm not super harsh. I'm pretty strict about what I will give 5 stars though, because to me, 5 stars means like one of my favorite books, would recommend to majority of people, something that will like last in my mind for a while. So I rated 20 books 5 stars, which I think is pretty good, honestly, for the year. 20 out of 123 pretty much checks out for me because, like, again, I'm not super lenient on like what I'll give 5 stars. But then I had 38 books that I rated 4 stars, which is pretty good. 4 means like I really liked it. Would recommend. It isn't just like something that I could see being like an all-time favorite, or there was like something missing. Like if it gets 4 stars, it's still really good in my opinion. And like star ratings are very subjective, and that's why like majority of the time I don't mention them. This is more of just like something personal because it is so personal. Like I don't want you to see like that I rated a book 3 stars and not read it because it's only 3 stars, you know what I mean? Like it just really depends. I think like more detail is necessary for you to make a decision on whether you're gonna read it or not. That being said, I do rate a lot of books 3 stars, and 3 stars just means in my head like it's okay, like it's not wonderful, it's not like the best, but it's not bad. So 53, majority of the books about half of the books I read were good. They were good. 2 stars means I did not like it. I wouldn't recommend it, but I could see maybe how somebody else would like it. So I rated 7 books 2 stars, and then I rated 1 book 1 star. That just means it's like bad. So I guess it's good that I didn't really have many books that I would consider just like bad books. I try not to be super harsh, but this was The Codex by Douglas Preston, which I actually have nearby. This is for our book club. I would have DNF'd it. I also usually I don't really track my DNFs. I don't know. I may do like a hot take video if I want to expose myself and show my DNFs, but I don't normally have a lot. Majority of the time I will power through it just so I can like speak on it. So that's why I did 1 star, like I don't include DNFs in that. So moving on to some author details. One of my goals for this year and what I will continue to shoot for next year, and this is a little bit embarrassing, not embarrassing, I felt kind of bad, I don't know. Majority of the books I read were from white authors, and I want to read more from a more diverse pool of authors, so definitely leave me your recommendations for books that are written by minority authors, or really just any non-white author, honestly, is what I want to read more from. So I'm going to show a percentage on the screen of how many books that I read from different ethnicities and different races. Definitely want to have a push for this to be better next year. Also, majority of the books that I read are from women. That's something like I don't do on purpose, but a lot of the books that I enjoy are written by women. The perspectives I find interesting are normally from women. But I read a decent amount of male audience too. Not quite ready to show my top reads of the year quite yet, but I will soon, so definitely stay ready for that. I'm trying to think of any other fun stats for you guys. Oh, I also have a like map picture I'll show. I like tracking like where in the world the books are from. So here's a map of like the world map for different countries, not including the US, which I have a separate map that I'll show in just a second. But this is like the different countries that the books took place in. And then also, if you want to pause and look at it or whatever you want to do, then the next map that I have is just of the US specifically, the different states that the books take place in. I don't know, that's just kind of fun. I like tracking that. So yeah, that is my stats for the year of 2023. Definitely have some goals that I want to get to, and I'll put in my other video, but I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.